people outside of Africa do not realize the wonderful people, the warmth, the energy that you see in Africa. And I think it's a pity because in the world, when we Zoom so much, I can tell you from my family, we really think of South Africa as the place we always like to go. It's because of the energy of the people who make that place so special.
Thank you for joining us today on the HSS podcast with me, Lenias Hwenda, where we talk to leaders and change makers who are shaping Africa's pharmaceutical manufacturing landscape and market with their innovations and their companies. My guest today is Mr. Nadav Kidron, the president and CEO of Oramed Pharmaceuticals, a clinical stage pharmaceutical company that is focused on development of oral drug systems. Oramed is listed on the Nasdaq Stock Exchange. We are really excited to have the CEO here with us today. Nadav, welcome to the HSS podcast. It is my great pleasure to welcome you.
Thank you, Lenias. It's a pleasure being here with you.
Wonderful. So let's start by talking about your really exciting COVID-19 vaccine. So Oramed has this very unconventional vaccine that really simplifies many of the complexities of mass COVID-19 vaccination campaigns quite significantly. Please tell us more about it. What is this new vaccine and how does it differ from the vaccines that already exist on the market at the moment?
So the Oramed vaccine is different in two very, very fundamental ways. Number one, our vaccine is a different vaccine than what if you get the Pfizer or Moderna or any of the other vaccines. Why? Because it's made out of 3 proteins. And what that means, and we're going to try to keep it simple, even for people without the scientific background. If you think about the vaccine, it's taking a part of the virus, and then we're sending it into the body, and then the body creates the antibodies. What we're doing is we're not taking one part of the virus, we're taking 3 parts of the virus. What that does is that the part which we use today, which is the most easiest one to get mutated, is not by itself. So there's 2 other parts. So you can think about it like 3 shields. So even if we get mutation to the first one, then we get another shield and another shield. What does that mean in practicality? It means that we can probably overcome this entire issue of variants. So think about the idea that you take a vaccine, that it will be good against the variants as well. So that by itself is one major breakthrough that we have with our vaccine, whether we give it as an injection or not. Add to that the Oramed's technology. And now we're looking at this amazing vaccine, which is good against the variants, but we can give it orally when you take it as a pill. Now, we all understand that we would rather take a pill than an injection. But I want to just elaborate a little bit more. Why is taking a vaccine orally is a major breakthrough? Okay. Number one, more people will take it. That's what we understand. What we call compliance. Compliance will be higher. I'm sure, Lenias, if I'll give you the choice between an injection or a pill, you would choose the pill. That's the obvious one. But you get another benefit. Because we give it orally, then there's less side effects. So today, people who take the vaccine, they suffer, they feel like COVID for another day or 2 or 3. When you take it orally, you're not going to suffer like that. But more than that, it's easier logistically. Think about a country in Africa that needs to get the vaccine to one place to the other. If you use the Pfizer vaccine, it needs to be at minus 70 degrees. Here, it's much easier to take it from one place to the other. You don't need someone professional to administer it. You can administer it to your parents or to your grandparents, whoever it is. It's much easier. And then the last point, which is very important to note, think about the waste. Just a big conference now talking about the pollution and the waste. If we're going to give a vaccine every 6 months to the entire world, how many syringes, how many plastics are going to go into waste? Right now, there's a huge articles about the huge shortage that there's not enough materials to produce it. But if you give a pill and you're done, we're creating a much better and safer world. So to summarize, what we're offering here is a pill that you take it orally. It's good against the variants, easy to take, doesn't need to be at a freezing temperature. So we're looking at the next generation versus what we're seeing today.
That's really amazing. I think, solving so many problems in one fell swoop with just a capsule, with one tablet, from climate change to logistics to cold chain infrastructure limitations that, for example, people or countries on our continent are facing. And of course, right now, Nadav, one of the biggest challenges we are facing on the continent is a limit of a shortage. We are facing a shortage of syringes and needles, which is going to coincide with just the moment when Africa is going to start getting vaccines in 2022. We are looking at a syringe shortages. So this is a very powerful solution to those challenges that we are facing. And of course, compared to the discomfort, I will take a pill anytime. But tell us, what is the significance of this new product in terms of how is it likely to impact the current vaccination challenges that we're facing on the African continent, where most countries have so far only managed to vaccinate 3 to 4% of their entire national populations?
Okay, so as a reference, a survey that was made in the US, 19 million people in the US said that they would not take a vaccine as an injection, they will take them orally. I believe that the culture in Africa will give you a higher percentage of people who would just not take the vaccine if it's given as an injection, that they will take it as a pill. We want to get to higher numbers of people who vaccinated. So for Africa, the advantage of giving it orally is huge as far as compliance. That's point number one. Point number two, when we talk about Africa, it's not only Johannesburg and Cape Town. Africa has got parts of it that are much more challenging. And if you think about the logistic challenge of getting the existing vaccines to the villages in Africa, it's almost impossible and the costs are enormous. You need to get it in a freezer temperature to a village in Africa. You need to get someone who can administer it and knows how to do it. It's almost close to impossible. If I can offer them a pill that I can send it to all the villages and anyone there can just make sure that people are taking it right, you're actually making the difference between people not being vaccinated to people in Africa being vaccinated, period.
That's really quite incredible. I mean, it has such tremendous disruptive potential on the African market, I think, in terms of a product that is easy to use, that is easy to transport at affordable cost. But tell us, Nadav, how is this product likely to impact other therapeutic areas? Are you looking to apply this technology in other areas besides COVID-19 vaccination right now?
So actually, the technology that we're using for the COVID-19 started off in a different world. Oramed started off working on oral insulin and has gone through 15 years of development and clinical development that is now undergoing a phase 3 under the US FDA, which is the most rigid, agency, and went through all the impossible and possible testing and toxicity studies to make sure it's 100% ready. So we utilize the technology that has been established, and then we took it into COVID. But we have a pipeline of many, many other products that by giving them orally, you enjoy not only the compliance benefit, but sometimes some actual physiological benefits as well.
Better compliance, a better safety profile, fewer adverse drug reactions. So it sounds really great. But 15 years in the development process of this technology, what made the difference? It reminds me of the story of mRNA vaccines. the transformation when things change was when somebody was able to package the mRNA and stop it from getting degraded every time it was injected. What made the difference for your particular vaccine technology?
It's a very interesting story. Our story actually starts not 15 years ago, but I'll say 35 years ago, 40 years ago. And how did Oramed come into being? My mother is a scientist who worked at one of the leading hospitals in Israel as a researcher on diabetes. And for 25 years, they were working on finding alternative ways to deliver insulin. And about 15 years ago, they had a breakthrough after all the work they've done. And that's when my mother came to me and she said, listen, son, we have a technology that can help hundreds of millions of people around the world. The hospital doesn't have the funds to develop it into a drug because that costs hundreds of millions of dollars. But you're a lawyer, you're a businessman. Maybe you want to come and help us make it into a reality. So I told my mother, sure, let's go and do it. So I left everything that I did at that time and I went to the hospital. I got the intellectual property out of the hospital and I established Oramed, which today it's $1 billion company on NASDAQ. But when we started 15 years ago, we started from my mother's garage with a concept that showed that we can actually deliver insulin in alternative ways.
Wow, your mom sounds impressive. We have to get her on the HSS
podcast.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
We have to bring her here, and she deserves a Nobel Prize. I think this is a problem that affects 500 million people worldwide. So this is huge. So we need to get her here.
And by the way, I want to tell you one thing, and you coming from Africa and South Africa. So me, my family, my mother, we are very big fans of Africa, specifically South Africa. We used to travel before I came to the United States. We would travel every year. We'll stop in Joburg, but our main destinations was Cape Town. I'm a big fan. I think people outside of Africa do not realize the wonderful people, the warmth, the energy that you see in Africa. And I think it's a pity because in the world, when we Zoom so much, I can tell you for my family, we really think of South Africa as the place we always like to go to, not only because of the beautiful water and the Lion's Head Mountain or whatever else that we like there, is because of the energy of the people who made that place so special.
That's really amazing. Well, thank you for that vote of confidence in the people of Africa. I think the warmth is returned. But is that what inspired you to on this journey to try to develop a product that actually helps with the challenges that the people of Africa are facing today?
We have a strong tie to South Africa. I actually lived for almost a year in South Africa just before university. And then I met a person there from Cape Town who was involved with us from the beginning of the creation of Oramed. His name is Leonard Sank. And he's actually has been on the board of directors of Oramed throughout all these years. So just interestingly enough, not only the member of the board, but the chairman of the board of Oramed is a South African. He lives in the US now. The CRO, that's the organization who runs all our trials here in the United States, is also someone who came out of South Africa. So we are a company that we really feel the South African presence in every aspect of the company. So it was pretty natural for us and it wasn't the first time, to look into South Africa as the place where we want to start and to push this thing towards the Africans people and to bring it to them ASAP.
No, that's really wonderful. So Oramed is a company with very strong African ties. That's actually for us very inspiring. We know that we have other Africans working with you that can help you on your journey. So you have just received approval from SAPRA, the South African medicines regulator, to start your phase 1 clinical trial in South Africa. And, can you just tell us how big this clinical trial is going to be, and when do you expect it to start and be completed, and where else are you looking to actually be doing complementary trials that will lead towards regular marketing approval of this vaccine?
So firstly, I want to start off by complimenting SAFRA because the whole process was extremely professional. We're working with the FDA, we're working with the European agencies, we're working with the Ministry of Health in Israel. And I want to tell you that at least in par, if not better in some aspects. So that when compliments due, we should say it out loud, and they've done a very, very professional work. So that's point number one. And I encourage other CEOs of other companies to look at South Africa as a good option for where you can enjoy the Western and top level of medicine, competitive pricing, and I think with the mentality of the South African people, I would highly recommend to anyone to be more involved and to do more stuff over there. So that's point number one. The goal of this trial is really to show a proof of concept that the same way that when we give the vaccine orally to animals and it worked very well, the same way works for people. So we wanted to do a trial which is going to be as short as possible that we can come and show, guys, it works. Because you have to remember, unlike a new drug or something which is very innovative and you don't know what's going to happen on the next turn, here we know that once we're showing that it's working, it's working. It should work also on 1,000 people than 2,000 people. So this trial was designed to be very small and quick. We're going to have 24 people who have not been vaccinated beforehand. They will come, they will take the vaccine. We'll measure later on their antibodies. If they don't have enough antibodies, we'll give them a second dose, and then we'll measure their antibodies again. And that's basically the trial. In next quarter, in the first quarter of 22, we should have the results of this trial. Once we have the results of this trial, then the Oramed's vaccine, the Oravax vaccine, is a game changer period because we saw that it works. And then what we want to do is we want to make sure we get an emergency use approval. So we are already now speaking currently with other countries to run a phase 2 that will follow up on this phase 1 in South Africa. That at the end of that phase 2, we could potentially get the emergency use approval, and then we can actually start selling it to different countries.
Are you planning to also seek emergency use approval from SAPRA and from WHO, those kinds of agencies?
So WHO, certainly, we want to do it because that opens the door for many countries. Because once we got their approval, so it's going to be easier on the other countries to do it. Regarding South Africa, right now, we're only planning on do it if we're going to have a local partner. Yes. So, for example, I'm just going to be careful, but for example, there's one country now in Latin America that we're speaking to a local partner that they will take care of everything, and we're going to do it through them. So we are going probably to do it for sure there. If we're going to have a major player in South Africa that will come and they will say, we are going to take care of it, because we need a partner who knows how to do a few things. Number one, to run the process, which is not a phase 1, we're talking about phase 2, to run the process to make sure it's run smoothly, it's run well. But number 2, we want this partner also to know how to get to the government so we can get a contract with the government that they're going to buy those oral vaccines. So that's why it's all depending on the local partner that we are going to get. We currently are in negotiation with a few partners in different countries around the world, but not yet in South Africa.
Yes, well, I think that you will not have too many challenges in terms of finding potential partners in South Africa. We have been talking to many people in this industry, and we know that there is a lot of interest and people are looking for partners left, right, and center. And already at the top of my head, I can think of a few that could actually be a potentially great match for you guys. But I'm sure you are looking into that and trying to figure out who would be the best partner, the best fit for yourselves. Now,
will you say that we have been so overwhelmed with the amount of inbound calls for so many countries that we haven't been actively pursuing the partners. We've more been responding. But we definitely would like to get the right partner in South Africa, and maybe we should be a little bit more active on that front, especially following this discussion.
Yes, but Nadav, quick question. Have you received any proposals from South Africans amongst this deluge that you're talking about?
So I do not remember. And again, most of it doesn't come to me first. I don't remember getting anything from one of the largest companies or players in South Africa, but I will have to double check it.
Yes, yes. Well, now we know what you're looking for in a partner, and when we put out this podcast, people will be able to see precisely what you're looking for and whether they meet that criteria for initiating a conversation with you.
Excellent.
Yes, yes. Now, will you, when you're going for, on your journey towards approval of this product, are you going to have the option of having those rolling reviews that we've seen with some of the early entrants, early vaccines that came, that were submitting data as it came in? Is that something you'll be looking to do?
Yeah, our goal is to try and get the approval ASAP. Our advantage is that when you give it orally, it's safer than an injection. Our advantage is that our technology has been established and has been proven to be safe. So that's why we believe and think that every agency will relatively be inclined to approve a fast trial that will get us this emergency use approval, especially when we understand the need for the people to get vaccinated by this Oramed vaccine. So that's our main goal, is to try to get to the approval of marketing ASAP.
Yes. So let's say all things being well, Nadav, everything goes according to your timelines that you're anticipating on finishing your phase 1, going into phase 2, phase 3, presumably concurrently in different jurisdictions once you have gone past the initial preliminary show of safety and immunogenicity of your vaccine. When do you anticipate that you would be, when would you like to actually start going into the factory and producing this vaccine? I ask because there's a large gap in access and in the world, and because of limited scale of production, and we are in desperate need of additional manufacturing capacity just to see Africa get vaccinated.
Okay, so number one, we don't necessarily will have to go through a phase 3. What we hope to do is to go through a phase 2 to get the emergency use approval after phase 2, and then potentially, if we do or not a phase 3, that will be post-marketing approval. So this, we hope to get a very, very relatively accelerated route to get it for approvals. We don't have time to waste because we all know that the oral vaccine is going to be in huge demand, whether it's for people who haven't been vaccinated or for people who have been vaccinated and need it as a booster. Everybody will prefer to choose, our oral vaccine. And that's why we're already now busy, and we assembled the team that are overlooking, and we're ready to invest the money that's needed in order to start the factories in place, because we know for sure that the supply that we're going to have cannot meet the demand that we're going to have, because the demand is going to be so big. So whatever we're going to invest now, we know it's still not going to be enough. And many of the countries that we're speaking to them now, part of the collaboration will go around them building the factories in different countries so we can potentially meet the demand. And I want to explain one more thing, which I think is extremely important. It's not only the demand now in the next 2, 3, 4 years until, I believe most of the world will end up taking this oral vaccine. We know now that there's a chance that in some years down the line, we're going to get SARS-CoV-3, SARS-CoV-5, SARS-CoV-7. So once we have the factories ready and the technology ready, we'll be able to act much better. The world will be in a much better place, in order to make sure that we can deal with it in the next time in a faster way. So what we want to do by all this collaboration is not only take care of COVID-19 and put it to rest with our oral vaccine, but also to have the infrastructure so we can deal with whatever the future will bring our way.
Yes. So how many factories are you looking to establish initially at launch before you think of expansion and scale up going forward?
So we're working now on one factory that we are going to own it, but then in every territory that we are negotiating with, they will also put a factory. So if we can have, for example, a partner in South Africa, so we would expect the partner to do three things. Number one, to take it through approval, the fastest, safest, accelerated way, so we can get the marketing approval in South Africa. Number two, to secure a contract with the country to secure the people of South Africa with the best vaccine that's there. And number three, and along and parallel to that, to build the infrastructure in order to be able to supply the people with a vaccine ASAP, where we're gonna support with the tech transfer to make sure that they will be able to erect those factories ASAP.
Yes, so this wouldn't be a contract manufacturing kind of arrangement. You are thinking of a co-development, co-investment strategy, basically, in South Africa.
Well, as a mezzanine solution, we may use some third party to produce it for now, but because we believe that the quantities are going to be so high and we want to push down the price, it makes sense for us. So along with having the CMO produce it, we're also going to have to build our own factories, and the partners will build their own factories that will enable them to offer it in the lowest price possible. Because especially in countries like Africa, there's a high level of sensitivity for the pricing, and our goal is to get the people vaccinated. So we have to think how we can best do it in a way that will enable them to get those best vaccines in the lowest price possible.
Yes, no, that's really, I mean, that's really encouraging that you're thinking of all of the pain points that African countries are likely to have. And I have great faith that you're going to find the right partner or in South Africa or perhaps anywhere else on the continent. There are a lot of great things being done in Mauritius, in Morocco, in Egypt. So who knows where you're going to land, right, with the right partner. And definitely wishing you the best of luck. That was Nadav Kidron, the president and CEO of Oramed Pharmaceuticals, talking to us about Oramed's COVID-19 oral vaccine. Join me as I continue my conversation with Nadav Kidron, the president and CEO of Oramed Pharmaceuticals, talking to us about their oral insulin and how it could be a game changer on the African continent. Let's talk about insulin. Diabetes is one of the fastest growing chronic illnesses with enormous unmet needs, not just in Africa, but all over the globe. We are constantly reading stories of patients in the US who are having to ration their insulin because of the prices being so high. But the burden on the African continent, particularly, is quite significant, and 60% of those cases on the continent are currently going undiagnosed. So the treatment needs right now, we don't even understand how big they are. We have an estimate of 19 million people living with diabetes right now, but that's obviously an underestimation. Can you tell us about your product? You have another very, very exciting product, insulin. How is it different from the insulins that exist on the market right now?
Okay, so oral insulin is very different from the existing insulin that you give it as an injection or a pump, and I will explain why. When someone gets an injection of insulin, the insulin goes right away into the bloodstream and basically takes the glucose, the sugar from the bloodstream out of the bloodstream. Many people who suffer, and what we're seeing mostly in Africa is type 2. People are not eating as healthy, and basically they have insulin resistance, or the body is not producing enough insulin and they are becoming type 2 diabetes. What often happens is that during the night, their liver is producing an excessive amount of glucose. That's why when they wake up in the morning, their glucose levels are high, and eventually their hemoglobin A1C levels are going to be high. When we give insulin orally, and this is why it is such a game changer, it goes directly into the liver. When we get insulin into the liver, we're actually signaling to the liver that there's too much glucose in the body, and the liver shuts off the production of glucose in the liver. So we're able to lower the glucose level, not by dealing with the accumulation of glucose already in the bloodstream. We're able to shut it off from the source by making the liver not making this excessive amount of glucose. What that means is that if you put it together with the idea that it's oral and it's not an injection, and people don't have the fear of needles or the psychological issue that he's not a diabetic as long as he doesn't inject, we can actually intervene earlier on and give those type 2 the oral insulin that will push away the point that they will become insulin dependent. So when you look specifically at a continent like Africa, where there's an issue of people who are undiagnosed, and even when you diagnose someone, they don't want to take the injection and the compliance rate is going to be low, oral insulin seems now like the best solution to slow down the progression of this progressive disease called diabetes and enable people to live better and healthier life. And this is extremely important because at the end of the day, resources are limited. We can potentially drop down the overall cost of treating diabetes in Africa by introducing the oral insulin as a treatment. And by doing so, we can allow to channel funds to other things or to people who have a higher level of diabetes. And therefore, this innovation can have a huge impact on the entire continent of Africa.
That's really incredible that your insulin practically mimics the natural pathway, just inhibits the production, stops the production of release of excess glucose in the blood because you're giving it through the digestive tract. I think that's really quite a game changer, but it's not just a question of compliance, Nadav. It's for many people on the continent, just the cost of the consumables that are needed to take insulin is already quite prohibitive. That it's limiting access just because people need syringes and needles and so forth. So this is really groundbreaking and very exciting an innovation for the African market. Is this product already licensed? And if not, how far is it from getting to the market?
So insulin, unlike the COVID-19, we do not have the emergency use approval, obviously. Yes. We're going through the rigid phase 1, phase 2, 2 phase 3s. So now with the US FDA, Europe, we're now towards the end of randomization for the phase 3, the first phase 3, and we have a second phase 3. So relatively to the world of diabetes, we're not far from marketing approval. We're looking in about 3 years or so to get the marketing, 3 years plus, I would say, to get the marketing approval. So far, we've only licensed the technology to one country, which is China, and we kept the rest of the world's rights with Oramed. We are evaluating whether it makes sense for us to break it into territories, so potentially we can give someone the license for Africa and someone else another country or continent, or just to keep it the entire world besides China to one partner as far as that. But we are definitely making a tremendous amount of progress. We're investing a lot of money in making sure that we can get the oral insulin to be approved as soon as we can.
Personally, I would be more in favor. I mean, no one is asking me, but I'm going to volunteer my opinion anyway. I would go more in favor with the territorial, perhaps, arrangement, just based on what we've seen in this pandemic with the export bans, particularly during emergency situations. I think this is really probably a good approach maybe for companies to when they're thinking about how to make their products accessible to the largest number of people. So, but that would be my preference. Now, Africa has a particular problem when it comes to diabetes. This it has the highest burden of undiagnosed diabetes. So now, for Oramed, obviously you have this oral insulin, but are you looking to go into also diagnostics, develop a diagnostic that can go with your oral insulin, or is it really more sort of depending on existing, of course, manufacturers like Abbott who are already making diagnostics for diabetics?
So we always, we always open and looking at the synergetic technologies. We having our main office both in New York and in Israel, and as I'm sure you know, there's tremendous amount of innovation that comes out of Israel, and we're being exposed to a lot of things that are making the world a better place. And we always look at new technologies. But being that said, there's a lot of things that are being developed right now. And a potential strategy where you can combine diagnostics with oral insulin, I think will offer the African market a much better solution for those who are undiagnosed, that will enable them not only to be diagnosed earlier, but to offer them a remedy that will be easy to digest once they're being diagnosed.
That is really much needed. I mean, the limitation, we talk a lot about access to treatment or lack of access to treatment in Africa, but the other problem that really we don't often hear enough about is, the enablers of that treatment, the diagnosis, how limiting and how limited it is on the continent. Now, the insulin that you have. So here I'm wondering about your expectations of what it will cost compared to the conventional injectable insulins or the inhalables that are available. I mean, how is the pricing going to compare with the existing market products on the market?
So again, the idea here is that we want to intervene much earlier before people will take the injectable inhaler, the pump, or whatever else is out there. We want to start off as soon as possible with the oral insulin. The pricing is going to be competitive. It's not a generic drug, so there is a cost there, but the exact pricing will be determined with a specific partner and a specific country in South Africa. I can just tell you that from our perspective, as I mentioned before, we have emotional attachments to Africa, and we see it as a high-level mission to try and to impact positively the African continent as much as we can. And I really hope it goes back to the same as the COVID-19, that we will have eventually the right and the ideal partner to work with on that territory.
That's really great. But can you tell us a little bit more, Nadav, about the delivery technology that you use to prevent your insulin from getting degraded once, a person, sort of takes it in? Is there such a risk, and how do you stop that process, that natural process of breakdown when people take proteins?
So our technology is basically dealing with the two obstacles to take peptides orally. And the number one is the degradation. And the second issue is the size, the molecular size of the insulin or whatever other peptides just doesn't allow it to go through the gut wall, and it goes into waste. So what we do is we put the API, if it's the insulin or the COVID-19, we put it in a capsule that we enteric-coated, which is a coating that is pH sensitive, so it goes intact. And only after you go from the stomach to the intestine, it dissolves. And then we have a development that we have created a protease inhibitor that was co-developed with the Nobel Prize winner. You mentioned Nobel Prize. So we have a Nobel Prize winner who's part of our team, Professor Hershko. So then we have this protease inhibitor that protects it from the degradation. And we have an enhancer that allows it to go through the gut wall, and then it reaches the portal vein, and from there, obviously, it's got no choice. It goes into the liver. And as we said, we want to affect the liver, and from the liver, obviously, it can outflow into the bloodstream. We have a wonderful video, and I highly recommend anybody wants to understand the technology better. I think we have it on our Oramed website or YouTube Oramed, but we have a nice video that really goes through the technology and explains it in a very graphical way.
That's excellent. I think, we certainly should get our viewers and in particular partners that might be interested in reaching out to you to have a look at this. But just the COVID-19 and, the way it manifests itself in patients and how it interacts with diabetes, basically, in particular. I had a conversation with Dr. Ankia Kotse, who's at the University of Cape Town. And they have been seeing, very, very interesting data in terms of, the prevalence of diabetes or what happens when people who are not diabetic comes into the clinic with COVID and when the treatment has to be administered, when you should put people on insulin, for example. Is this something you've looked at in terms of strategy, like your vaccine and the insulin in terms of putting it onto the market? Because it seems to me that these two products are very complementary in the context of this huge burden of COVID-19 and the huge burden of diabetes in the African context.
So we have a huge advantage that once you give something orally, it's much safer. That's why we said you're going to see less of a side effect. And the body knows, because think about it, we take food and we put it into our mouth. So the body actually knows how to deal with foreign things that are coming into our body. So both the COVID-19, the oral COVID-19 and the oral insulin, because it's orally, should enable it to be much more user-friendly than anything else that you give as an injection. And that's why we feel more comfortable. And if you look at the safety data of all the trials that Oramed has done to date, it's so safe, which is unbelievable to watch, where you can see a drug that works so well and so safe on the other hand. And that's the advantage, and that's why it can enable, like you said, combination with other things because of the advantage of the oral route.
Yes, no, that's really a very good target product profile with such minimal adverse effects, which opens it up to other uses and applications in combination with other products. So just going to the pandemic and what you've seen so far of how the world in general has responded to the COVID-19 pandemic, how it's played out. Did it surprise you, what you've seen, how countries have responded? Was it a surprise? And do you think that the challenges we've seen during this pandemic are fixable? How do you think we should fix them if another pandemic should come, if you think they can be fixed?
So listen, this has been a crisis that affected the entire world, and the world tried its best to deal with it. I'm reading now some Plato, which obviously talks about the challenges of democracy, and we see it, the ability to reach decisions and efficient decisions are limited by the nature of the governments that we have. So it's never going to be optimal, and as humans, we always limited because there's only that much we know. And the COVID-19 caught us non-ready. And basically made us very humble to realize how much we don't know and how much we don't control. Being that said, the human nature is such that we strive to make the best out of lives. And that's what the mission has been of Oramed, to try and make the world a better place by taking science and new innovation and making it into something that will be accessible for many, many, many people. I think one of the lessons, and I think it's famously said by Bill Gates, that he warned that we should have been more ready. And I think one of the takeaways that we should have from this pandemic, and I mentioned it before, is let's make sure that for the next round, not that we're done with this one, but we should already prepare the infrastructure to make sure that we are going to be ready for the next challenge. And I can tell you that at Oramed, when we plan things ahead, we're also thinking and to make sure that we're going to have the tools and the ability to act fast if and when we're going to be hit again. And the probability is very high that it's going to happen. It's just a question of time.
I think human nature, we people can't help, just being human, I suppose. And in situations like this, of course, we hope that we can overcome our worst instincts as people, and think in a way that is protecting the collective, but it doesn't always work that way. So I think, we can pretty much conclude here. Nadav, do you have any other last thoughts that you would like to share on our podcast before we conclude this conversation?
I just want to share that we should all be very positive in the sense that there's a lot that's being developed that is going to deal with these big issues, such as the COVID-19 that we're seeing now, such as diabetes, specifically if we talk about Africa. So I think we should end with a lot of hope, and really with all the limitations of human beings, it's really amazing, and we should salute to what humanity has been able to bring to the world. And one of the things that comes with every bad thing is really to understand that we're all united, we're all the same as humans. And when COVID-19 comes, it doesn't know if you're African or American or French, we're human and we're together. And together and being united, we can really deal with anything that will come our way. So we're very proud to be part of the companies and the people trying to make this a better world. And I really invite everyone to follow us and to keep on reading and to see what is our humble contribution to try to make this world just a better place, a healthier place for all of us.
Certainly. And we can tell you, I can tell you that we will be following you. And we hope that you will come back and continue to talk to us about the progress that you're making, and where you're at, and the difference that you're making out there with your products. But I think these are very exciting products for the world, because they just help with so many challenges that many countries are facing, not just in Africa, but everywhere, in Latin America, in Asia. So we thank you for all the work that you're doing to develop better products, more cost-effective products, easily accessible products. Mr. Nadav Kidron, the President and CEO of Oramed Pharmaceuticals, thank you so much for coming on to the HSS podcast. It's been my great pleasure to have you on.
Thank you, Lenias. It's been my pleasure being here with you.